Hey everybody, so I'm going to show you how to do a liquify effect, and it's fairly simple. As you can see on my layers panel, there's really only 3 layers that are involved. The majority thing that you're going to need is your own photo and a little bit of creativity to make it look interesting. So I'm going to start from the very beginning just in case. So what you're going to do is you're going to start a new file. So you go to the little house window at the top, do new file. Depending on which direction you want your photo to be, you can either do 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 8.5. I would call this Liquify Portrait, and then you will make sure your resolution's no bigger than 150 because more than that is really unnecessary. And then you're going to hit create. Once you do that, it's going to create a blank menu for you. So I'm going to start from scratch just by having my image on my picture. So you can simply drag and drop your image that you're using right into your canvas. And if you want to, you can also kind of constrain the proportions by scaling it to make it look like an interesting composition. I would recommend that you edit it before you put it in Photoshop, but you can do some things in Lightroom too, just in case. Once you find the composition that you like, then you're going to simply select your subject. So what you want to do is go to your selection menus, either go to select, and you could do subject from the very top, or you could try the object selection here. If it's hiding underneath one of the other tools, you just click and hold it down until it appears the one that you want. You've got your lasso, you've got your marquee. I find that the object selection does a pretty decent job, and you can see as it's hovering, whatever's pink is what it's going to select. So I'm going to select it by just clicking on it. And now it's not perfect. It missed some things. So you have a couple options. You can either use your quick selection to add. So at the menu, it changes. So if I hit the plus selection, I can click and select some more items and move by holding down the mouse and drag some things around. Or I can do my lasso if I want. So my regular lasso is going to allow me to like draw the selection that I'm looking for, and it adds to it. If you've got a lot of like little flyaway hairs, there is another way of selecting your subject. And so when you're on your selection area, this one specifically for your object, this button at the top menu appears. It says select and mask, and it brings up a whole new menu of just selecting. There are options on the left-hand side on the toolbar, and so this one allows you just to use like a regular brush selection. If you hover over the tools, it also gives you a little video about like how it works. There's this one, which is Refine Edge Brush Tool, which is super helpful for like those flyaway kind of hairs. So when I click on that and I have the plus selected at the top, and I just kind of hover over it, it tries its best to like make that selection more visible with those flyaway hairs. It is not perfect by any means. And like this picture had some blurriness happening around it. So there's some other things that you should know while you're in this menu. On the right hand side is the other options for editing. So you can change like the smoothness. So if you're looking at the picture while I'm moving this around, it kind of edges to make it more of a smooth selection, so it's not so crisp. You can feather it as well, so it's slightly different than smoothing. And contrast would be like a brighter contrast between what it's selecting, and shift edge. So the shifting edge allows it to move inward or outward of the selection itself, so you can see kind of like what it's doing. You can still just do a manual brush tool, either bringing it back or taking away. So like if you really don't want something, like I don't want this thing here, I'm just going to select over it and make it manual. Like there's a random flyaway there that I don't want, and just kind of going back and forth. So like, oops, I messed up. You could do two things. You could either do Command Z, Control Z, depending on what computer you're using, or go back and do the plus, and that kind of allows you to fill in those gaps. Now it's still not super great, but this is fine for what we're doing and what we're working with. So what I'm going to do now that I have it selected, oh, I actually wanted to show you something else. So sometimes when it does people, it also recognizes that it's people, and so it'll ask you if you want to select certain like types of things there. So you hit OK at the bottom of the screen, and now the selection's kind of been refined. All we have to do now is make a copy of what we have selected. So the shortcut key is Command J or Control J. So Command J is for a Mac, and that, as you can see on my layers panel over here, I now have just a copy of what I had selected. So I have my image and one without a background. Okay. The one that I have for my background, what I'm going to do is select it. And let's say, for example, I want to do a filter on this background so that there's a difference between my Liquify layer and my background layer. Sometimes it's helpful to actually label them so that you know which one's the original and which one's going to be the Liquify. So I can simply click once, click twice, or double click, and it will allow you to retitle those. Okay, so back on my background layer, I'm going to go down to the bottom. It looks like a yin yang. It's a half circle, and when you click on it, some options show up. So I'm going to change my bottom layer to a black and white. Okay, so there's a black and white filter only applying on the layer below. If you want to just make sure it's only applying to this one, you can also create a clipping mask just in case. So like if this was vice versa, if you wanted only to affect one specific layer or the other, or like if I only wanted my top layer to be in black and white and I want my underneath to be in color, I could do that as well. So completely up to you on which direction you want to go into. All you have to do is right click on the filter layer and then do create clipping mask, and it's only going to affect the layer it's directly on top of. Okay, so for my Liquify layer, this is the special effect. All I'm going to do is go up to filter and Liquify, and it's going to bring up another menu. Like, what do you want to do with it? So here is the options for like playing with some things. Like for the nose, for example, if you look at the nose while I'm moving these bars, this is by making the nose height different. So it's liquefying it by slightly adjusting. This is using artificial intelligence to adjust like how you want things to be. I'd be interested to know like how you guys feel about that, right? So like making it smile, like, ooh, creepy. She's either more smiling or not smiling. So there's some options here that you can kind of just play around with just because. And on the left side is the tools. So the left side does different things depending on what you're trying to do. So you can play around with these too and see what they do. So like making things appear bigger. So like this is the bloat option. So like if I wanted to like make this a little bit more puffy. If I'm just going to do a simple Liquify, this is just like a smudge. And what that does is it kind of pushes whatever is around it and moves it out of the way in like this very liquefied form. So what I'm going to do is make sure my brush is big enough. You can play around with these and they will do different things. It doesn't need to be too big because what you're doing is you're pretty much just like moving things around. Now notice my brush size is too large, so I need to make it smaller. It goes like all or nothing practically really fast. So I'm going to do on my face here, and I'm just going to go constantly back and forth and just kind of like blur and blend like what I want to showcase. If you make your brush a little bit bigger, it'll make a little bit of a bigger hole, right? And then you can push it further. So you have to do a little bit of groundwork there and just kind of like play with it. Okay, so like say for example, that's what I want and I'm happy with it. Then I hit OK. And then so now you have some color underneath with black and white on top because we have a filter layer. If you want to go back in, you can still go back in and adjust it, but you cannot go back and undo what you already did unless you want to do Command Z or Control Z to start over from scratch. So it'll go back where it left off, but you can't bring back what you did. It'll just completely stay the way that it is. So there you have it. There's your Liquify, and then you can do File, Export, and Quick PNG, and that's all you have to do.